A very big story here locally, but also may have national implications when it comes to our nation's military. Yesterday, we learned new and disturbing details in the case of the death and disappearance of Navy sailor Angelina Resendiz. There was a trial kind of court proceeding within the Navy yesterday for a fellow sailor who has been accused in her death. But also we've now learned for the first time that that sailor who was accused also is thought to be involved in other cases of sexual assault involving other victims. In that court proceeding yesterday was our reporter, Madison Schlegel, who now takes this seat where Evan was just seated. And man, there is a lot of information to sort through. Madison, I know you filed the report yesterday, but there was stuff that we couldn't even get into that. And you and I were talking about it. First and foremost, what were the key things that stood out yesterday in that proceeding that you're like, we gotta mention this?
Yeah, Eugene, there was just a slew of information. I mean, yesterday's court hearing, it lasted only an hour, but in that hour we learned a ton of new details. First things first, the trial counsel started by basically outlining a couple of those assaults that had happened before Jeremiah Copeland, who's the person who's now accused of killing Angelina Resendiz, before that assault even took place. Those assaults dating back to July of last year, an assault dating to November of 2024, also an assault just days before Angelina was reported missing, or we now know that she was killed. There was an assault on May 25th, again, just days before that. But we also learned a little bit about what we think the government is putting together as a timeline as to what happened to Angelina. They basically say that on the evening of the 28th, she met up with Jeremiah Copeland, and she had told some friends that that's who she was meeting up with. A couple hours after she was with him, though, her friends started receiving cryptic text messages from her, just saying things that were kind of out of the ordinary for her, okay? After that, at around 2 a.m., a male friend of Angelina's had received a phone call, and in that phone call, we learned yesterday from the trial counsel that Angelina was just frantic. She was begging someone, anyone of her friends, to come and pick her up from Copeland's barracks. In this phone call, again, pleading for her friends to come pick her up. And at the end of the phone call, when her friend finally agrees to come and check on her, she tells her friend, "I love you," before hanging up the phone, which was really striking to hear, because when her friend showed up just mere minutes later to come find Angelina was never to be found. After that, the trial counsel had put together that the next morning, some of Copeland's roommates had seen Angelina in bed with Copeland. A chief from the Naval Station Norfolk also said that he saw Angelina in the bed with Copeland, but some of the roommates said that they were even questioning whether or not she was moving while she was in the bed. They described when they saw Copeland in bed with Resendiz that she was wrapped up in a blanket, only her feet were sticking out, and Copeland was laying with his head on her abdomen, and kind of what the roommates describe as just really awkward posturing. The trial counsel then did move to say that they believe that Angelina was dead by this point. They believe that she was killed that evening that morning, early morning on May 29th, right after that 2 a.m. frantic phone call. Some of the evidence that they brought in to talk about some of that were 55 exhibits of evidence, and that 55 exhibits of evidence not only spanned across Angelina's instance, but across all of the other victims of instances that we have heard in the case of Jeremiah Copeland here. But at this point, they then put together heart rate info that they had got from Angelina's wrist Apple Watch, saying that her BPM shot up to at least 130 at around 3 a.m. that morning. And it wasn't until about June 1st, June 2nd, when Copeland asked to borrow one of his friend's Jeeps, that we learned that Copeland had Angelina in the barracks over those days, from the 29th all the way to the June 1st, June 2nd date. They believe that Angelina was dead in those barracks, and then he took that body, put her in a black duffel bag, and wheeled her out into the common area, through the barracks, down the barracks, and put her into a car and took her to the wooded area near Broad Creek subdivision, in which we had showed you guys, and on top of that, it was the same wooded area that he had visited that investigators then found Angelina in, and when she was found in that black duffel bag. So again, there were just a slew of different things that the trial counsel was able to string together. And again, even just here spewing, talking to you, reading my notes from court yesterday, that's still only skimming the surface of the information that we learned, not to mention even the details that we learned about those prior assaults that had happened before Copeland even met up with Resendiz.
Before we get into that, Madison, let's talk about this case regarding Resendiz, because there's a lot that you just put forward.
Yeah.
And as a reminder to people, this is information that, from the Navy's perspective, right? From us getting information from them, this is coming out for the first time.
Yeah.
This is not something that we have not asked for. We've asked repeatedly, even for the Navy, to confirm the sailor in question's name. All of that for the first time is coming out of this court proceeding.
Yeah, Eugene, we've been working hard for the last almost 5 months to get any kind of answers from the Navy about whether or not we've heard that Copeland has had prior assaults, whether or not there is any action in this case, or even just to get his name in general. We've been fighting to get that information. But as we're learning this, Esmeralda Castle, who's Angelina's mother, is learning this information at the same exact time that we are. So seeing her in court yesterday, her reactions to all of this, her seeing Jeremiah Copeland for the first time ever, knowing that that's who's now accused of her daughter's death, it was truly something harrowing to see her in that court yesterday.
Yeah, and Madison, as you know, Esmeralda and I have had several conversations over the last few months, and I know that moment is something that she was waiting to see, that she can finally get some answers when it comes to what they believe took place that led to her daughter first disappearing and then death. But some of the information that you're saying, though, she's been saying for months. Mm-hmm. Like, she was saying that the friends of Angelina had called her frantically, was reaching out and said, hey, we tried to get in touch with her and then we couldn't do so. We hear that in the court proceeding. We had heard there were some questions on whether or not, I believe like a captain or someone had seen her the day after in the room. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of relayed to her like, hey, we checked and we saw her. Well, now we hear from prosecutors that they believe, as you just said, that she had already been dead, and that it seems as he was almost using her body as a prop at that point until he could get the body outside of the base to where he ultimately did. That, again, that's according to prosecutors. Could you also speak about how cell phone data played a role in this? Because it's my understanding that is how they were able to kind of track and in part connect him to the scene where all of this took place.
Yeah, it's actually kind of impactful to see how much the technology that we use in our day-to-day lives was truly part of the evidence that was brought forward to put together the counsel's argument here in this case. So not only were they tracking the data from Angelina Resendiz's Apple Watch and through her phone, they were also tracking Jeremiah Copeland and his information through not only iCloud Apple storage, but also they were able to recover one of his phones, which had what some would refer to as revenge porn on it that he was being investigated for other cases. But on top of that, on June 3rd, investigators did sweep his barracks. And in that barrack, they found an additional cell phone. And Copeland had told them that the cell phone didn't work, that he wasn't really using this cell phone. But in that iCloud data that they were able to recover, they found that he was taking pictures on that phone as of June 8th. So even though he told investigators that that phone didn't work, he wasn't using that phone, the phone has now suddenly disappeared. Investigators cannot get that phone. They do not have that phone in custody right now, which is part of the reason why they're going for that obstruction of justice charge, and partly some of the questions that the official who was overhearing the case yesterday, John Butler, some of the questions that he had around the case stemmed upon whether that obstruction of justice charge was truly valid because of the lack of this cell phone or not. And on top of that, John Butler also had questions about, like you had mentioned just before asking this question, about whether that chief had come into the room and actually seen Angelina be awake that day. We've got Chief Parker, who says that morning Angelina was awake long enough to wave hi to him from the doorway and say that she was okay. Again, John Butler, who was the hearing official in this case, did have questions about that too, because the prosecution in this case had already stated that they believed that Angelina was dead by that point. So they think that the chief who was there, who claimed that they did see Angelina and confirmed that she was okay and awake and alert, that he was only there briefly and kind of was more worried about Copeland's status than worrying about who was in bed next to him. So on top of those questions and on top of the questions surrounding the cell phone data that they tracked him, especially when he left base that day and drove to the wooded area in which Angelina Resendiz was found, that cell phone data had basically, he had looked up the wooded area on his phone. He had pinned that wooded area on his phone as a location. After he did that, he put his phone into airplane mode, and then he still, while his phone was in airplane mode, they were still able to track him. They tracked him to that wooded area. He walked out there for about 15 minutes or so, and then he walked back to his car, and then drove and stopped at a McDonald's before he drove back to his barracks that night. So again, a lot of details that I just threw at you there, Eugene. But again, in the only hour we were in there, I've got more than 5 pages of court notes, because the way that the trial counsel had detailed everything was truly in a chronological order, tracking him through, like I said, basic tools and data that we use in our everyday lives, our cell phones, our Apple Watches. I wear an Oura Ring. Who would know that the technology that we wear today would be helping prove such a gravitas in a case like this?
And we were wondering how they were going to stick to a case where murder is the charge, because of the fact we know that we received the results from the chief medical examiner that said that the cause of her death was undetermined. So we still do not have that at the moment. And even in all of this conversation, you were in there, the prosecutors are saying that they believe that she died in that barrack. However, doesn't seem like they've said anything about how that happened. So I wondered as we went into this, and since the information has come out now, how they were going to connect the dots and still try to keep a murder charge into all of this. All of the things you listed seem to be the reasons why they're going to do that, obviously. But then one last thing there, I believe there was did they find DNA, blood samples?
Yeah.
At any point, the car, the barracks?
In a couple different places. Eugene, I think that was also shocking, too. They were able to find some blood traces from Angelina, not only in Copeland's barracks, in his closet, and also in the staircase at the barracks as well. So one of the most shocking images I can say that we saw yesterday in court was when investigators went to check Copeland's barracks, they sprayed it with an agent to help look for those DNA traces. And when you spray this agent, you illuminate it, and it turns bright blue and it lights up. They showed a photo where you could see from the common room in Copeland's barracks, you could see the duffel bag marks, the wheel marks, tracking through Copeland's room and out to the common area, just lit up bright blue in these photos. It gives me chills thinking about it, because Esmeralda Castle, Angelina's mother, is not only learning this information for the first time, but she's seeing that photo for the first time as well. So there were blood traces of hers that were picked up in multiple different places that were connected back to Copeland. And to go back to what you said before, especially when it comes to when they were piecing together that they believe that Angelina was killed, the trial counsel said that they believe that she was killed right after that 2 a.m. phone call. When Copeland heard that one of her friends was coming to rescue her or pick her up from wherever she was, they say that Copeland was in such a state of distress in his mind, knowing before that he had mental breaks after being caught for some of these instances that he was also under investigation for, that he kind of went off the handle. And in knowing that someone was going to show up, that's when he had lashed out and, they say, allegedly killed Angelina. That would have been, they were putting that death right around after that 2 a.m. phone call on May 29th.
So many things to discuss there. And I know that you have to work on a report today following up on this.
Yeah.
But two things I want to ask you before we get you to doing your job today. We appreciate your time.
Of course.
The first, let's talk about these other cases. You just kind of alluded to them as well. This is the first time officially what we're hearing from the Navy confirming that there were allegations that had preceded this. And I believe in at least one of those cases last year, Jeremiah Copeland had also been interviewed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there were at least 3 different instances in which the trial counsel had outlined narratives of different assaults that had happened. Again, I had mentioned them at the top of this interview, but in July of last year and November of last year, and again, an instance just days before Angelina was killed on May 25th of this year, we learned most of those assaults happened on other service women who were also serving alongside Copeland. But one of those assaults was actually a civilian, that one that happened on that May 25th day, that happened at his barracks as well. So in addition to learning the details about Angelina, Esmeralda Castle, her mother, was also learning at the same time that she wasn't the only victim. And I think the big question that lingers here, and a little bit about what we're going to dive in this evening on 13 News Now, is kind of that next push. We had a representative for the League of United Latin American Citizens who was there yesterday. We grabbed an interview with them, and for them, they said that the most striking fact is that the Navy knew that he was under investigation for multiple different assaults already. So why wasn't he in confinement before someone was killed? Before these acts could go far enough where he was able to take a life. So today we're going to dive deep into that sound and dive deep into what kind of happens here next. Esmeralda says that she's not backing down. She's going to be pushing reform as she has been over these last 5 months. But now the defense, which we heard nothing from yesterday, they did not respond to any of those arguments. They now have until September 23rd to submit their response, and they have waived to submit that response in writing. So yesterday, we did not hear a word from Jeremiah Copeland other than yes sir, no sir to John Butler. And other than that, we didn't hear any words from their defense as well. So also looking forward to what comes in their response and hearing Copeland's response to these allegations which were lined up against him.
Just this information, I mean, it's for us who have been covering it for the last 5 months, and Madison, you and I have talked a lot about this case since Angelina was first went missing on May 29th, and a few days after that I think is when really things started to pick up, and we were able to talk with Esmeralda at the time, just searching for her daughter. To get here, we've heard from various people with various tips throughout the time, and so to finally get facts from the Navy's point of view here is quite striking when you consider, as you just said, that this individual that they're alleging killed Angelina Resendiz was already under some form of investigation, not with one, but with multiple other potential victims. And it does, as you said, lead to the question, why was he not already separated from other people if that's the case? And so protocol is a big thing that Esmeralda Castle has been going, about when it comes to the Navy. Madison, we've both reported on her push even to change some laws, right, and change procedures that the Navy currently has. And I know the Navy Secretary wrote a letter recently saying they do not believe that they were at all out of protocol with this case. However, they do have people looking at it now, looking to see if there are some things that could change. Esmeralda's not waiting for that per se. She's already working with a congressman down in Texas.
That's what I was going to say next, right?
To change how they go about listing, and I'll let you speak to it, to change how they go about listing sailors as being AWOL. She wants to make some adjustments to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's another big push here. Not only legislation being pushed by that congressman down in Texas, but they've also been working with Senators Warner and Kaine here in Virginia. And on top of that, Vicente Gonzalez has pushed forward an amendment to go forward that does make sure that going forward, we're taking a better look at how these service men or women are being classified, especially when they do go missing. We've kind of learned throughout our investigation here, and in speaking with more representatives from LULAC, we also learned that it really can be detrimental to these service men and women when they are declared AWOL and declared that instead of not knowing where they are. And now that this legislation is being put forward, Esmeralda basically says that she's not stopping here, okay? So she's pushing those senators down and congressmen down in Texas to do work. We've got our senators here in Virginia who are holding up that legwork too. Also, we had that letter that was sent by Tim Kaine and Warner that was sent forth to push for more accountability from the Navy as well. And their response, obviously, you just said that, Eugene, about how they said that they believe that there were no faults in their investigation. But they also had said that before we had learned any of this information that we're learning now. So I think that if any of this information had come out beforehand, we would maybe our questions for the Navy would have been a little bit different to start out as. But obviously, we honor the work and due diligence that they're doing behind the scenes to make sure that they've got all of their ducks in a row, especially as this case moves forward, which I don't think that this case is going to be wrapped up easily anytime soon.
No, it's taken us 5 months to get to this point, but to the Navy's credit, I'll say, it appears that they are putting together a thorough case, right? Mm-hmm. And so they've been very particular about letting things leak out. So, we're, of course, going to follow it, but a lot of questions moving forward. Madison, thank you. I'm going to let you get to your work today, and as you go out, we're going to play the interview from Esmeralda Castle, the mother of Angelina Resendiz. We'll play it in full here, moments after she learned the information that we just brought you in that naval court proceeding yesterday. Let's listen to her words from her. And Madison, again, thank you for all your work and coming on, okay?
Yep.
All right, so what we'll do is make a statement, a couple of questions, then we'll break off into individual. You want to ask a question?
Yeah. I thought she was going to make a statement first.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I don't.
How do you think?
I think you should just ask me questions.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Ms. Castle, what was your reaction when you saw the accused appear in court this morning?
I didn't really have a reaction. Yeah, I saw a person, and that's how I feel right now.
When did you find out that he had multiple victims and not just your daughter?
Today.
And what do you think of that?
That I think is a problem. That I believe is the absolute problem, and that is the problem that we've been talking about. Like, this is a pattern, and there is a practice, and there are, people in the military that have these issues that hurt each other, and instead of taking care of it, we move it around because people don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be responsible for what's happening right under their noses, and that is very disturbing to me to hear those stories about those women and who's speaking up for them. Who, like, my baby's gone, they're still here and they still have to live with this.
Do you believe the Navy should have disciplined him prior to late May?
I can't tell you what the Navy should have done, but they could have prevented this. This is absolutely preventable. This is a tragedy and it cannot continue to happen.
You've been so strong, and you had so many inklings about this before we've even learned some of the details today. And in hearing what you heard today, do you feel your mother's intuition was correct here?
I don't know what that was. Like, what was there's something wrong happened. There's something not right happened. And one thing I'm learning, you know what? Why didn't they look for her? Like, she was in a closet, what I heard, for a couple of days in a bag before she was, placed out in the field. Like, that's all they had to do was take it serious and look for her. Do everything that they could have to look for her. If it took looking at everyone's closet that was involved, they should have looked in everybody's room, and that didn't happen. And I learned today, this base does not have cameras. You do not know what's happening anywhere. The cameras that they used were off base. That's how they knew, like, where Angie was, and phone data. That's how they knew how he got there, when he got there, and so this is our military.
And speaking of our military, you've been pushing for reform and working with organizations to help bring awareness to that. Do you think that this is maybe putting more emphasis on the work that needs to be done moving forward?
Absolutely. Just learning more and more about things that just shouldn't be happening. And it can be changed. It can absolutely be changed, and it can stop, and it can get better, and the military can get stronger. And what is it going to take? How many more people? How many more lives? How many more women? How many more men? How much more tragedy do we need before we all just take a look and say, hey, something is not right? We need to take accountability. We have to accept that there is a problem so that we can start moving forward together. And this isn't just a military issue. I can't stand how they believe they're in their own closed-off universe. They are not. We are all together in this. And change starts with everyone who's involved. That's the family, that's veterans, that's active duty, that's everyone. Everyone who has a part in this should be involved in this.
What is your message to the other victims who are a part of this case?
We're here for you. We're here for you. People are ready to hear your voice. They're ready to hear you. You can help make change. This will not happen again. It's time. It is time.
How would you like to see the Navy, the military change? You know, more cameras on bases, maybe a different policy, like a different way that they have to handle cases like this? What would you like to see happen?
I think that requires more than just me to say what I think could happen. Because I really don't know where all the gaps are. I just know this cannot keep happening. That's where it starts. Like, where are we falling? Where are we falling through the gaps? Where is it? You know, you have a person who entered the military who already had a history of, sexual misconduct. And it just escalated all the way to the point where he took somebody's life, one woman after another, a woman from the community even, and instead of doing something about it, it's just hushed and quiet and covered, and it shouldn't have been.
How confident are you that you'll get justice in Angie's death?
I am. I'm confident, right? It's going to happen. But how do we keep it from happening again? Like, my girl's gone. And this is her voice. She wants us to stop. This cannot continue. And I'm not going to, this is my life now. This is it. Things have to change, and it can change for the better. And nothing to be afraid of. Change is inevitable.
Do you have other children? What has been your support system?
Yes, I do. She has siblings. She has older siblings. She has younger siblings. My support system is my family, my friends, my cohort, my colleagues in law school. Like, everything that is gathered around me is because other people have stepped up to help me. And all I do is I just show up.
What is your message to the Navy after hearing everything in there?
If
you could look at them right in the face, what would you say?
I think more people should be in jail right now. I really do. I don't think that person is the only person that's responsible for what happened to her.
You mean in your daughter's case?
Yes, in my daughter's case. Yeah.
Do you believe that Copeland, the accused, had accomplices?
I think that there is a failure in her command that, allowed this to happen. She probably could have been found faster, right? She probably could have been found alive. But whatever reason, I don't know. But if you ask me, there should be more people that are responsible for obstructing justice in this case.
So you're talking about accountability up the chain of command, not active accomplices in the crime.
I would call them, well, no, not active accomplices. Like, they had a hand in it, but they had a hand in it in preventing her being found.
Watch that.
There you just heard from Esmeralda Castle, the mother of Navy sailor Angelina Resendiz, who first went missing May 29th from Naval Station Norfolk and was found dead off base about 2 weeks later. Now we have just learned, as you just heard from our reporter Madison Schlegel, through a hearing yesterday, that prosecutors believe that a fellow sailor murdered Angelina there on base, held her body inside of a barrack for days before driving it off base and dumping it in a wooded area in the woods in a Norfolk neighborhood community. And not only that, but that individual is also accused in other cases with other victims, including sexual assaults, which Madison just told us includes both other servicewomen and a civilian, at least amongst those victims. So a lot of questions that we have. You hear a lot of questions and concerns that Esmeralda Castle has. And later on today on 13 News Now, you will get a report from Madison Schlegel on the questions that another agency that is working with the family, an advocacy group, the questions they have and what they want to now see change. So we'll get that report later on tonight. And you can find that not only on our broadcast, but on 13newsnow.com as well.